and welcome to the next episode. So, today's guest is someone who brings both deep insight and a human's touch to some of life's biggest questions. So, Lauren Jeffery is a seasonal educational facilitator, a licensed registered psychotherapist based in Toronto with more than 25 years of experience. She spent her career helping people navigate learning, growth, and emotional complexity, especially in high pressure professional spaces. So, as the president and solutionist at Point.Shift, Lauren focuses on the emotional and ethical dynamics within financial services, helping advisors better understand their clients and themselves. But her work goes far beyond finance. Lauren dives into the complex relationships we all have with money, and time, access, and the mental framework that shapes our lives. So, in this episode, we're going to explore what it means to stand on the edge. We love that, don't we? Of big
Hmm.
decisions, of emotional burnout, or simply the next phase of life. So, we unpack how money stories are tied to access, equality, and emotion, and how we can start making more conscious choices one small shift at a time. So let's get into it. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, Lauren. So, what led you to explore the relationship between money, time, and access in such a personal and thoughtful way?
Well, as you alluded to, we're talking about standing on and navigating life on the ledge and really being on the precipice of something, whether it's plummeting to your demise or leaping off and soaring. I had one of these moments in 2019 where my professional and personal life kind of blew up. I was going through some significant health issues, and I recognized that I couldn't keep working the same way, but also not being independently wealthy. I couldn't just sort of retire from life and read books. And so I had to start looking at myself critically and having some tough conversations while figuring out how to pay the bills. And so I ended up going back to school. I have a bachelor's in education with a focus on adults. So I went back and I did my master's to become a psychotherapist because most of my career has been helping people. And one of the last conversations I had before leaving my corporate life was with a financial advisor who was seeking guidance on how to deal with a client's question. And the question he didn't know how to answer was, um, how do I describe a suicide clause to a client in their insurance product? And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, she asked me, how the suicide clause works, so I need to tell her something. And I'm like, so I think you're missing some other things that we need to address. And it was that this man was very focused on helping this woman access money. His own compensation is tied to whatever this individual does. And so this really kicked off me thinking about the impact of money in the world and how it frames our decisions. And, as human beings, what do we do with all of this? Because we are bombarded by information.
Yeah,
So I
that's
become a
right.
psychotherapist, right? And
Because I
then,
was going to, yeah, so because I was going to say, was there a moment in your own life where you felt like you were standing on the edge? But obviously, it sounds like what you were just saying there. And how did
yes,
that experience shape your work? So it sounds like in that moment,
yeah,
you were standing on the edge there.
yeah. Because in the middle of one of the big events in this crisis is my husband ends up having a cardiac event
Wow.
6 weeks to the day after I had just had my first hip replacement. And for context, I've had one full hip replacement, both my knees replaced, and about four ankle reconstructions and fusions. So kind of a white hot mess in this body. But anyway, so my husband has this cardiac event, and like he's given 1 in 100 odds of survival, and I'm left. I shouldn't say I'm left, but I'm sitting there going, like, I'm not even 50 at this point. My health is precarious. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life because now kind of everything is in flux and I start, it's the self identity. Who am I going to be? What am I going to do? How am I going to survive without selling my soul anymore? Right? And because I started early in my career talking to advisors about mental health. I've been talking about mental health and loneliness and, the impacts that these have on their clients for years. And so now I'm doing something about it, and because talking to clients and individuals, as you very well know, about how their life is going can be challenging. And then when you add the complexity of money on top of it, yeesh. And we're in this very pay for play society, right?
Yeah, that's
We're
right.
highly consumptive and we need money.
So look, so many people feel pressure around money and time, as you've said,
Hmm.
and but often, so they do have pressure around money and time, but often, can you name why? Why do you think that is?
I talk a lot about time and how funny it is. You know, when we were kids, and I think it's probably the same where you grew up, but in Canada, we have summer vacation, sort of like end of June to the beginning of
Yeah,
September. You know, Canadian kids go feral and have great lives. And as a little kid, summer seems to last forever. The days are long and endless and you know, but then when you become 40 or 50, like you go to bed and you wake up and 6 months have gone by. Right? So we really aren't aware of our time. And I challenge my clients often when they're like, oh, I'm so busy, I don't have time to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, okay, so walk me through your day. And really, what ends up happening is, they're spending 5 or 6 hours watching TV, they're just hanging out at work, they're not doing, because they're not being mindful. Because it's
yeah,
really easy to detach and just kind of while away the time, right? Doom scrolling or, avoiding, which is a big thing we do today.
yeah. And so, but you've already touched on that already. But the emotional toll of constantly feeling like you're either earning or spending, and really just being. What are your thoughts
Hmm.
on that?
100%. Because oftentimes our spending is driven by unmet needs. So I had a bad day at work. My boss yelled at me, so I need some retail therapy.
Yeah,
We worked really hard on the job site, so the boys and I are going to go down to the bar and have a couple pints. Oh, so we've done the retail therapy, we've gone out, and we're tired, so we don't want to cook. But that's okay because we've got Skip, Door, Uber, like we got people bringing food to our house. And so it kind of skews time and perspective, and we actually become uh, ruled by somebody else's schedule, right? Like a lot of times we are ruled by like the news schedule, right? The news cycles in a day, right? Humans like that. And so it's easy for us because we also like to take the path of least resistance.
yeah,
So it's really about our perception and not taking a good, honest look at why we're spending the money, right? Is it solving a problem or an unmet need? Or is it actually necessity? Because chances are that unmet need isn't going to need money. It needs time with your family, time in nature, time with yourself, right? As a therapist, I can tell you, like, having conversations with yourself is tough. And then when you have to, like, apply a critical lens to your own behavior, that's why people come and see me, right?
yeah. That's right. And because I'm talking about some of the things that you do, and the reality of. So when you talk about access being tied to money, how does that show up in everyday decisions, like healthcare, food, or even education? Uh,
Yeah. So access is interesting because we only know what we know, right? We only understand our own personal experience. But what biopsychosocial theory tells us and all these other theories tell us is that we as human beings have an incredibly unique experience, right? Like this is
yeah,
why when we look at our siblings, I'm like, you might go like, how are we related? Right? Because we have this very unique
yeah,
experience. And so we don't understand what other people's access looks like. So the easiest thing to describe access is like, um, do you call it DEI in the UK? The uh, for equity, inclusion of individuals. I'm drawing a blank. It's 9 o'clock in the morning here.
yeah. No, it's
Um,
yeah, no, not really. I mean, I've spent a lot of time
Diversity,
in New Zealand.
equity, all of
I
that
can
stuff.
understand. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a bit different.
So
Yeah,
as women, right off the top in Canada, we're earning 30% less. We are still penalized for having children. We are also penalized for not having children. Right? So when we talk about access, it's not just the physical, literal access, but it's like, where is the system shutting us out? Right? And so depending on your skin color, depending on your gender preferences, pronoun preferences, sexuality, whatever your thing is, chances are the system may or may not work in your favor. And
yeah,
until we actually sit down and go, okay, a perfect healthcare. So women, it wasn't mandated to have women included in medical trials until 1993. And this is why we talk about these lost girls, especially around autism and ADHD and other how heart attacks present in women, all sorts of things that we didn't know. And so if we don't advocate for our own health care, which means standing up for ourselves, asking questions, pushing for access, and all of that stuff, we are always going to be marginalized and at the disadvantage.
yeah.
Because we don't earn, we're already marginalized by 30%. We also can't pay in Canada. We have a two-tier healthcare system,
Right.
right? So money shows up in a lot of different ways, and then this is a more social justice space, right? Middle-aged women, we are often invisible, right? So we are overlooked for promotions, we are overlooked as life partners, like we've just been tossed out because we're
Yeah,
done.
yeah.
This is all access.
And I mean, this is what you've already said about, obviously, you've mentioned there about the importance to recognise that access is not equal even in countries like Canada. And I've spent a lot of time in New Zealand, so things are a little bit different because
Hmm.
we tend to pay for medical over there, whereas in the UK, they sort of do pay for medical in the NHS, but they think that it's free when it's not, sort of thing. So those things come into play, don't they? In regards to that. But
And the
talking about
narratives too.
yeah, and talking about time, money, and the mind.
Hmm.
So you mentioned biases like the status quo bias. How our brain shortcuts holds us back from making better decisions.
Hmm.
What's one mental shift people can make when they feel stuck financially, emotionally, or otherwise? And I work a lot with stress, and obviously that's a stressor. Money is a
Hmm.
massive stressor. That's why I'm loving talking to you, Lauren. I'm creating a movement here to be able to go forward.
Let
Women
me
who
know.
are in
I'm here to
middle
help.
age. Women who are in middle age, we don't want to be tossed to one side, right? So, what would you say about that? So, about biases like the status quo bias, how your brain shortcuts holds us back from making better decisions, and what's one mental shift people can make when they feel stuck financially, emotionally, or otherwise?
it's such a counterintuitive response. Stop. Just stop what you're doing. Take a pause, you know, when you're ready. I always say give yourself at least 24 hours to feel the feels, figure things out, and then in the next day, take an inventory of your life and allow and give yourself the permission, the freedom, and more importantly, the grace. Because when you get to this point, and I talk about this sanity thief, right? Because we just our lives are just taken away from us because we get caught up in the machine of the world. We're so hyper connected. And the biggest thing we can do from ourselves is step off and stop and take stock of who we are. And sorry for the cheap, shameless plug. I'm just finishing up a little online learning module called Where You At, and it's this exactly. I've created a short online questionnaire that focuses on what you think, what you feel, what you value, and what you are doing through the context of money, health, family, and work. And it's how do you feel about things today? And then within this online program, so you get access to the questionnaire, you figure out where you're at. There's a journal that prompts you to explore all the questions that come along in this report. And I found that people are often surprised at what they think they are doing versus and how it supports what they believe they think, feel, and value, right? Because values are often, we often have competing values. And how do we deal with that in life? And
Yeah,
the way that we get dinged, and the most people, as women, we get dinged financially.
yeah. And I mean, look, it's funny how you say that because I love those sort of things that you do because, because it is really about writing it down. And I know with people I work with, which, I'm really interested in what you're talking about there, is because it's really about journaling and just, putting it down because it's so powerful because people think they're doing all the right things, but they're really not taking it on board and actually taking responsibility.
Ah,
Actually
I was
taking
going to use the A
responsibility.
word, accountability.
No, I say that all the time. I mean, and I've had people say to me, I've got to take responsibility, accountability. And it's like, yep, you do. It is really about, and that's the first step. And I think doing things like what you've put together, I think is a great thing. And I'd
Thank
really
you.
like to find out more so that I can share that.
Stay
So,
tuned, it's
how
getting
can
there.
someone begin to understand whether their discomfort is a sign of growth or something more serious? Because I know that people don't like getting into a discomfort. They don't. They don't want to change quite often. They say they want to and they come in a hiss and a roar, but then when it comes down to it, it only lasts short term.
The one thing that I always like to say to my clients is discomfort or being uncomfortable doesn't equate necessarily to pain, danger, fear, right? We just
Mm,
we talk about this shortcutting, right? Because if we're uncomfortable, that means something's wrong because something's
yeah,
not the same. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, but if we're not actually investigating and having these conversations with ourselves, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm having this reaction, but like, am I in immediate in danger? No? Well, then you just need to calm yourself down and figure yourself out because this is where we miss opportunities, right? Success always leaves, somebody said this, success always leaves signs. And if we're not looking for them or we're not open to them, then we miss them. And this is the going
yeah,
through on autopilot, right?
yeah,
And so when we write things down, it helps us detach from them emotionally because then it becomes something over here that we can refer to after. So it's a literal detachment from ourself so that we can then objectively or give it some literal distance to think about.
Have you got anything else to add? Because obviously I'm going to keep asking you these questions, just to
I,
sort of so that then the audience can find out more about you. But in
yeah.
regards to faith, fear, and forward movement, so you do
Mm.
explore the idea of faith. What role does belief or trust in self or something bigger play in navigating uncertainty? And what's the power in asking what's the worst that could happen when we're actually stuck? What is the worst
Oh,
thing that could
such good
happen?
questions.
Thank you.
So I was raised in a very like a COE household, right? Anglican faith. Um, and so I was always raised within within the church. And as I get older, right, we start to question, we start to chafe against things and ideas. And I abandoned the notion of faith for a very long time, poo-pooed it, you know, until I actually got my psychotherapy license. And during my training, I had to do a placement, and it was during COVID. And I don't know if you know this, but during COVID, in the height of COVID, the city of Toronto literally locked people down for a year and a half.
Oh,
You were
really?
allowed to go to the doctor, the hospital, the drugstore, and the grocery store. That was it. But at this time, I'm working in a transition house for men who are in recovery, working to transition back into society. So I'm working with men who are dealing with substance abuse and recovering from that. So then I start learning about the fellowships, the 12 steps, and how they deal, because really they don't, it's not about God in the 12 steps, but they do talk
Yeah.
about this notion of a higher power. And so then this, and starting to work in this recovery space, I should also state that I am an ally. And, and watching these men work through their recovery and have this notion of a higher power, something that is bigger than you. Because an addiction, like the booze, the drugs, the sex, the gambling, whatever your addiction is bigger than you because you can't stop it. So if
Mm,
that's bigger than you, then that therefore implies that there is a benevolent something also that is bigger, which
yeah.
is the notion of the higher power. And so that's kind of where I sit. But very interesting, I am I have some clients right now that I have wonderful, fulsome conversations around God, religion, and how we live in today's society, and this notion of judgment and the shoulds and and which where does it belong in a very connected modern world. So, in a very long-winded way, faith is really important to people
Yeah, yeah.
because sometimes we have no control over, like, we look at what's happening in the world today. Holy smokes. People are hurting, people are crying. And so, if they're going to go to their place of worship, whether that's an actual physical place or out in nature or even through quiet meditation, man, I'm here for it. If that makes you feel better and that helps you live peacefully within your community and the world at large, I'm here for it.
That's great to know. So, how can someone begin to reframe their relationship, going back to the money and
Hmm.
time thing, especially when they feel like they never have enough of either? And what's one practical way to become more aware of how access or lack of it affects our decisions? Do you want me to
That's
answer
a no.
both
That's a no.
questions?
So the first part was the money. So
Yeah, so how do you
how do you
reframe the
wrangle money?
relationship with money and time? Yeah.
Okay. So let's just talk about the money piece first. So how do you wrangle money? You need to recognize and remind yourself that money is a tool. The problem is money acts like it's sentient.
Yeah.
And so when we physically start questioning, and this is something I do with a lot of my clients, is the activity now becomes, why are you doing this? And so now you are always questioning yourself, why am I spending this money? Do I need it? Or is it because I'm hurting, I'm uncomfortable, I feel like I have a resentment and somebody did me wrong and this is going to make it okay? Like, you got to start having tough conversations with yourself.
Yeah.
It's about budgeting. Where's your money going? Because I don't know what it's like in the UK, but here in Canada, we are largely cashless.
Yeah.
So we've lost the concept of money,
Having money
physical,
in your hand.
tangible money, right?
Yeah.
And I say this to people all the time. If you really want to get a handle on it, go cash.
Yeah. Rather than having cards, because then it's invisible, isn't it? You have a more of a thing. And it's what about the time then? The money
So,
and time.
right? So now we have to look at time differently because this world has created value around time, right? Your employer values your time at whatever your salary is. Your psychotherapist, they value their time with their fee. But what people often forget is the value of their time also includes their years of experience, their education, and everything else. So this is why most people undervalue themselves or spend time doing things that really they don't need to do. So when we talk about time and money, really it's where do you value? What's the value? Is it doing the work because being a psychotherapist or working with middle-aged women serves a purpose? So the value is it pays your bills, but there's also value in the actual work that you do in the purpose.
Yeah.
And that also has a cost. Like there's an economics to everything.
Yeah.
So my thing is just follow the money.
Yeah.
And if you're churning through hours, because, you know, is it worth it to me? Nope. And that's often the response. And then you give yourself permission to let that go.
Right. No, there's some
It
great
sounds very
things that
easy,
you're
but
sharing.
yeah.
Yeah, some great things you're sharing. So the other question was, what's one practical way to become more aware of how access or lack of it affects our decisions?
Listen for no. Um, listen for uh, qualifications. So, what happens with me in Canada when I try and engage with financial advisors? Um,
Right.
Oftentimes, I'm shut down because I don't hold any financial advising accreditation. I've
Yeah.
never sold a financial product or service in my life, and so it's a really easy way to shut me out.
Right.
Well, because you don't have the license,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't matter that I have a master's, a doctorate, and everything else, right? But that's an access issue.
Right.
When you go to seek healthcare, what's the experience,
Yeah.
right? And especially, I find, and as a woman and being a larger woman, uh, it is very apparent in terms of the Medicare, the treatment that we receive within medical settings, responses in terms of, like just go out and lose some weight. Well, yeah, that's stop eating. Well, that's not my problem.
Mm.
My problem is that, the PTSD is this, which is triggering this, combined with another like stressful, like we don't actually stop and think about our lives in these ways. Because if we
No.
did, we'd all be really sad and
Yeah,
think,
that's
how did we
right.
get ourselves here?
I think that's right. So I've just got a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
So what's one simple question someone could ask themselves today to feel more grounded in their choices. So if a listener is overwhelmed by decisions or uncertainty, what's a small, powerful step they can take to find clarity? So to feel more grounded in their choices and a step they would feel more clarity. Do you want me to ask you the question separately?
Nope, because it's sort of the answer would be one and the same for me in this instance.
Right,
You got to stop. Step off, turn off your phone, turn off the TV, stop.
right,
Give yourself 24 hours. So I called my 24-hour policy. Apply the 24-hour policy where you don't react, you don't respond, you don't worry about it, right? Because this is one of the myths, and this is how we use or how individuals weaponize time. Think about limited time offers, and all this bad negotiating. Like if you
yeah,
don't respond with X amount of time, you're going to be penalized. Like that's terrible. But that's how we roll.
mm,
But oftentimes it's depending on the context, it's not legal. It's 1,000% not ethical, right? And but what most people don't recognize is they have time.
yeah,
And so my big thing is just stop for a second. Stop for 24 hours because the chances are the world's not going to end.
no, and I mean, and let's just sort of, end on a personal note. So, what's one belief about time or access that you've had to let go in your own life? Because I know you shared a lot at the beginning, and you've obviously gone through these nuggets of
Yeah.
wisdom that you've shared with us today. But what's one belief about time, money, or that you've had to let go in your own life?
Monday to Friday, 9 to 5.
Right.
That
Okay.
whole, no, because really, the world doesn't work like that anymore. We work on a
No.
24/7. And so when we then further constrain ourselves to the Monday to Friday 9 to 5, especially for me because I was working in financial services, so I was tied to the financial markets. The
Right.
markets are open Monday to Friday 9 to 5. And I felt that if I wasn't sitting at my desk, regardless of whether I was working or not, right, access, that my clients would think I was a bad either psychotherapist or practice management professional because I wasn't sitting at my desk waiting and prepared to help them. Hello, that's super unrealistic. And so now I've been able to give myself permission to sort of do things differently because I'm dealing now internationally. So I'm dealing with different time zones. I deal with financial advisors all across Canada. And so this is the thing of time. Time is time is, you know, defined by the person,
Yeah.
right?
And
So
I
your
think it's
employer,
about putting boundaries in, isn't it, as well? Don't you think it's,
thousand percent.
because I know I say that to clients all the time. It's really about putting boundaries around themselves. Obviously, putting yourself first, and as you're saying, stop, and just putting yourself first and saying this is what you need to do, and putting boundaries around their time so that then they can have that for
Yeah.
themselves.
So I was having lunch with a girlfriend yesterday, and she was like, I finally learned the trick to the calendar. I was like, oh, what's that? She's like, I need to schedule my stuff first. And I'm like, right? Because
Yeah.
on my calendar, Tuesday through Thursdays is when you can book meetings. It's not that I'm not working Monday to Friday. I just need time, as an author and other academic. I need time to just think and be or
Yeah.
write. And they think that if we limit access, that we are limiting revenue or income earning potential. Like that's the other
Mm.
myth.
Yeah.
It's
No, it's
really kind of
interesting, isn't it?
insidious. Yeah.
And so, if someone's listening and is stuck really on that edge, what would you tell them right now? And I know you did say stop and some of those other things you've covered, but have you got anything else
Ask
to
for
add to
help.
that? Ask
Ask
for
for
help.
help. because it doesn't have to be like this. And
Do you
if you
think
don't
as
know where to
women we
start,
don't do that though? I mean, I know that I come across that a lot. I think as women we're sort of guilty about asking for help and actually
well,
putting
because it's
more.
not a luxury that was afforded to us. It's
Yeah.
still not afforded to us today, right? Because I'm working with a client right now. Uh, they're 60, their husband passed away, and
Wow.
and they're like, I don't even know who I am. She wasn't even afforded that. She went from her father's house to her husband's house, raised the children, ran the business. So she was a wife, a mother, a daughter, but she wasn't herself,
No, this happens all the time, isn't it? It's
right?
like
And
the
so
yeah,
and it's this lack of understanding and because now, women are told that, because you bear the babies, you got to raise them too. So when
yeah,
they're sick, oh, you got to be at your daycare by 6 o'clock, or because you get fined $5 a minute or whatever it is here
mm,
if you're late.
wow,
But then your boss is mad at you because you have to take the 3 o'clock train out, and they want to have a meeting at 5 o'clock on a Friday.
yeah.
But it's a guy. Your boss is a man, and he doesn't have to worry about that.
No,
So
no,
he can
it's
put in
such
the
different, isn't
time.
it?
He's got the access, right? Crazy.
It's funny you say that actually, because we were watching a film the other day. It was that film 9 to 5, where that was funny, where they showed how they were changing different things when they actually tied up the boss in his house, and stuff, and how
Hmm.
they were changing things, and then the big boss came along and said, "Oh, the women, the women are, the women stand behind the men, don't they?" I think that's great what you've shared. So, if somebody wanted to connect, um, and and thanks for everything that you've shared. Have you got anything else that you want to share? But also, how can people find you? And I will create, get the links from you with your website, socials, or where should they go to be able to work with you or find you?
Go to my website, or reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. Either place, I'm fairly active and around. So yeah, but I hope we have many more of these conversations because
Oh, me,
these are the
I'm really looking
conversations we need
forward
to
to
have.
doing some. Yeah, and I'm also really looking forward to doing some other things with you because it's been absolutely fantastic.
Thank
And I
you.
don't know
It's
whether
been a
you want to
pleasure.
add any more before we say till the next time.
um, if I was to say anything, it's, we got to be brave, but we also have to stand up, and we have to have our voices heard. And it's hard and it's scary. But if we, like, I mean, our lives depend on it now,
Yeah.
literally.
And I think,
So
Lauren, from what you've said, is just, and I love what you're saying because it is really also empowering women, because mainly, working with women, but to be able to be strong and, put themselves first and use all of those different principles. So, we will be sharing that more, and I look forward to doing some other calls with you. But it's been great to spend time with you today,
thank you for
and
the wonderful
you have
conversation.
the rest of a great day. Hopefully, you got good weather there,
No,
and we'll catch up on another episode and talk about some other things.
absolutely. Thank you very much, Jackie. I appreciated it.
All right, bye.
Bye.